All right. So, welcome back to our top 15 fight countdown, only 2.5 years late, something like that. Yeah, it's fine. It's totally fine.
Hasn't haunted me for ages.
Yeah.
Exactly. That doesn't like keep us up asleep like sleep paralysis demons or anything like that. So essentially, we're not going to finish the final project as initially planned for various reasons. Mostly being life gets busier. There's no sense of or no idea of it slowing down in the next little bit. And those projects had a lot of behind the scenes going into them between scripting, different recording dates, audio editing. They were a lot more work behind the scenes than they initially appeared, but we've kept people in suspense forever. So we're going to do a little special audio podcast. This entire podcast will be done in one recording. It's going to be a lot more off the cuff, a lot less scripted than the videos themselves. But we're going to go through each fight, talk about why those fights were listed the way they were, what we really liked about them, any feedback or criteria we had while reading them, and work our ways down the original list. This is the original list when we first started the project 2.5 years ago. So this does not include Chapter 8, Chapter 9, Dragon's Ex Machina, any little side RPs that took place before the end of Chapter 7. So
Basically, none of the stuff where writing got better.
yeah, definitely when going back and rereading some of this, feeling a little mad at past me.
Don't worry, we'll be saving those for the second part of the second top 10 list, which should be coming out in 10, 15 years based off our current track record.
I'm feeling
2042.
good about 2050.
I think 2042. I think we could be ambitious.
Yeah, maybe optimistic.
Yeah. We'll shoot for an even 2045. So, anyways, as a reminder with this list is based off our pre-existing recognitions. It's obviously not a completely defined list. We have our own biases involved in what things that we like to see in a fight. This is the same list that we made all those years ago, so the criterias of the original video is all still relevant. Definitely take a review at that original YouTube video we put down where we break down what we consider makes a fight good. Just as a refresher, I'll probably put that in a post in the link whenever we share this. But otherwise, I think we're good to go. So, if someone can give me a really epic fight number 9 voice, I think we'll get started.
The Voltio, the Radio Man.
Fight number 9.
Perfect. So, fight number 9 brings us into our first encounter with well, not first encounter, but first time they come up on this list, second encounter with the Tri-Dragons. This fight is known as Leo, Kotana, Kaya, and Relton versus Bravebriar, Madge, and Liz, which can be found in Chapter 4.
And what a mouthful it is.
So this fight is basically for the team dynamic. And there's a whole bunch of really, really good stuff in this fight with kind of little individual moments, quotes, all that stuff. And we're going to get all into it. But I think really at the end of the day, the main reason this fight made our top 15 list was there's such few really good group versus group fights where they're also using team play because there's actual team play moments throughout this fight that makes it really interesting to watch.
Yeah, I mean, as you all probably figured already, most of the fights that we have on this list are mostly just one group facing like some super powerful big bad, or a few people fighting against like a whole swarm of like nameless red-shirt mooks. Stormtroopers, yes, yeah.
But this is a good team versus team fight. We're talking like this is 3 versus 4, so the pirates do have a small edge. But one of those fighters at this point is Kaya, which at this point in the story, I think this is really her first action fight ever. I don't think she has anything.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the first time we even saw powers was Chapter 3.
Yeah, it was when she parted the Hellion Blizzard.
With the yes.
But that wasn't a fight; that was a moment. So this is Kaya's debut fight, which makes this really interesting. And so we kind of get this nice real balance, and it opens up with probably one of the best gags to a fight we ever had, which is Bravebriar tossing literal fruit at them.
Mm-hmm.
I had such a great drawing for that. I think it's lost now.
Oh well, I'll have to redraw that. Back to the art dungeon for you. But yeah, so it opens, which is kind of like a really good almost metaphor for this fight, because this fight never takes itself too seriously. Like, there's some stakes involved here, but the entire fight has this level of almost wittiness to it, where like BB and Leo are giving each other nicknames the entire time. There's things like Leo calls Bravebriar Hairdo or 2-bit bounty hunters, and then she responds with things like pretend pirates or calling Leo Jr. It's just this levity that's throughout the entirety of the fight that don't really see in a lot of the fights on this list, which kind of gives it just a bit more, little less tension, a bit more fun. Which nothing wrong with fun.
No,
Well,
yeah, it's a very nice contrast compared to the events of chapter, 2, where we had people actually die, and the ensuring chapters and the
I
ensuring events in
mean,
this chapter too.
it's also an interesting contrast because at the exact same time, our much more serious and dangerous enemy, the Aura Drinker, is attacking the other group right now.
Mhm.
Yeah, it does get a bit of an actual contrast to other events elsewhere, and that's actually really leads into a point because this whole fight kind of builds into the idea of this is where they stop being rivals and they will eventually become allies. Because this fight ends, spoiler alert, with them working together to stop Abe. So I think the fact it has this early levity makes that easier story beat of them working together flow so much better
Mhm.
because it's not like they were just trying to kill each other. Now they're working together. That's so unrealistic. It was, well, they were trying to kill each other, but they were also like throwing jabs. Like I think one of my favorite lines is from Kotanai here, where she goes, literally says, "There are too many cats on this island" when she's fighting with Madge. And there's like a blurb from a Leo post which reads, though she jumped back and set off a long-winded series of insults, including everything from Leo trying to win Kaya slash Windy over, which was the nickname for Kaya, and to how he was a novice, he felt himself a bit red in the face by the sheer quantity, but he was catching his breath as she spouted out the verbal abuses, which is just this idea of like, this is not a fight to the death. This is like a backyard playground brawl almost.
Mhm. And one other thing that I kind of appreciate is the whole dynamic between Relton and Liz. Because I feel like we have not had that many actual wizard duels in the RP at all, to be honest.
This is actually the first. That's the first real wizard duel in the
Hmm.
entire story.
No, yeah, so I thought it
Oh,
was really
yeah.
cool, seeing them, bring to bear their magic and trying to counter each other's spells and this big chaotic mess that was honestly a lot of fun to read.
And it's also just kind of interesting because at the time I don't know if we had nailed down the magic rules quite very much,
I mean,
but
a little.
but it sort of accidentally establishes Liz as kind of this magic powerhouse kind of early on, and not entirely intentionally, but she holds her own pretty well.
Well, I think that plays well into a fact that whether this was like a lucked into retcon or not, Liz draws power from her environment, and that's something we kind of explain better later in chapter 9. But it makes a lot of sense that Truncantis is kind of like, if she was like a Yu-Gi-Oh card, she had the field advantage for this fight because
Right.
like it's a magical forest that has literally absorbed crazy amounts of magic over the last couple decades. There could be no better place for her to fight somebody.
Hmm.
Right, and apart from, I guess, Raziel in Chapter 2, there hadn't really been a bad guy that had posed, or an antagonist that had posed a very serious threat other than Abe himself, who was just getting started in that other scene.
Oh yeah. I think it also speaks to Relton as a character too, just to pivot the other end of that fight, because he holds his own throughout that entirety of this fight, while also mentioning the whole idea of playing into the team collaboration. He actually is providing
Yeah,
energy shields for Kotanai, Kaya, and Leo the entire time. So he's like
Hmm.
blocking and dodging their blows while fighting this one-to-one duel with Liz, and then he pulls off the win with not even a magic move; it's with deception.
which is just excellent from my view, just because, sorry, I'm stumbling over my words. I'm kind of bad at this sort of thing, but it's just, I like that at the end of it, there's just a little bit of a, bait and switch.
Yeah, like it subverts the
Like,
expectation.
like you expect him to hit her with some big spell, and that's what it's all been building up to, and then it's not really.
Nope, it's a little. Oh, I lost. Oh no! Then here's a little blind spell, sucker punch. This is also when we come to the other aspects of this fight too. One of the ones I really enjoy. This is where Leo's second fabrication blade comes from. This is the first time we see anything that isn't Inferno mode, and it comes from Kaya, which plays also nicely into the fact this is her debut fight, which is how
Hmm.
we get our hands on Gale mode. And it's something Leo and Kaya crave very much in the heat of the moment of this fight, which once again is that idea of like this is team play. This is not them fighting individually. Like Leo's like using Kaya's magic to make a sword. He's using Relton's magic to have a shield. Kotanai pulls a save on him at one point, just pulling Madge away from him, essentially throwing a tree at him. This entire fight is like very intermingled. Like it starts with Brave Briar fighting Kotanai, and Leo and Kaya fighting Madge, and then they end up trading opponents where it's like Brave Briar and Leo are having a sword duel while like Kotanai's like running away from Madge and keeping her like sheer brute force away. It's just there's a really good flow in this the rest of the fight.
Can I also just say how absolutely amazing it is that Zev decided to have BB, suplex Leo partway through the fight?
Just about to say, it's one of the things I like about that character in general is the fact that you never know quite what to expect when you're facing off against Briar.
I definitely had repressed that memory, so thanks for bringing that back up. But no, agree. Definitely like the idea that like the suplex, which again plays into the comedy and the later tone of this fight. So like this fight just definitely earns its spot. There's so many good things going on here. When it comes to a story flow, the fight ends, as we said, with the call coming in from Leto, essentially saying there's a really major, bigger problem going on. Abe is burning through every other character at this point in a whole bunch of back-to-back fights, and it forces them to work together to essentially save their other team members. And it's cool to get to see that levity fight have that resolution of like, now we're going to transition into being allies. It really happens very seamlessly. Like, there's not anything. It's hard to find a specific moment if you go back and read it where it's like we went from being enemies to being allies. It happens very gradual, very naturally, and that's kind of what you really want in this sort of situation.
Yeah. I mean, back when I first wrote the script for this, I was kind of a bit disappointed that the fight had like no decisive conclusion. But the more I look at it, like the more I reread things and such, I feel like that's pretty much like the only way things could have gone. Like with considering like how the rest of the chapter plays out. Like
yeah, kind of lets both sides walk away with their heads up. Like no one really lost.
Exactly.
Quotation mark. Yeah, no, the fight does struggle in a few other places. Like I said, like as Rue pointed out earlier, we are still figuring some stuff out. So things like Madge's super strength at this point wasn't really defined. So, like literally tearing a tree off its trunk and throwing at them was, I don't know if that's something we would approve nowadays, because this was definitely much more in the throw everything at the wall and see what sticks.
Of being an early accessor.
Yeah. I don't know how Elo slipped super strength past me, but she somehow did it. But yeah, so there is a lot of really early stuff in this. I think there's a point in here where like Leo and Briar are having a sword fight, but I don't think there was a decided like who was the better swordsman because like Leo was formally trained, but Briar had way more experience, and it was kind of just vague on who if either of them was like the better swordsman or
I
not.
always pictured it a little bit even. Like when I would try to imagine how I would draw it, it's just always like crossblades and they're like pushing back and forth,
I very much get like
It's
the
amazing.
Pirates of the Caribbean sword fights vibe from that one.
Yeah,
yes,
like
yes.
not to get off topic, but the one in the second movie where they're all around the windmill.
Yeah, that's a good one. That definitely kind of fits the vibe where it's more goofy. It's like a serious matter, but it's also quite goofy. Yeah, I think that's about everything we want to say. So the only thing that keeps this fight from getting further down the list is while its goofy nature is definitely a huge pro, it is also a con when we talk about much more later, darker plot, emotional resolution fights that have so much more weight to them. Though it does make you hope that maybe at some point there could be a rematch for this down the road to get that more conclusive ending, even though it's just like a sparring practice training thing.
I know Brandon was trying to make it happen, and we just didn't have the time in chapter 9.
Oh, Liz Relton, a rematch.
Yeah, he like nothing was ever said inside the actual thread, but he was just like, it would be cool if we could manage to do that. And I was like, maybe, but it just never materialized.
Well, that's all my thoughts on that fight. Did you guys have anything extra you wanted to share?
Nothing on my end.
Nope, nothing here either.
All right. Well, on that note, I think we're gonna move down our list to fight number 8.
All right, so fight number 8 is Giovanni and Yen versus Raziel and Corinth.
That's I'm pretty sure
And
her
you can
name
find-
is Cilantro.
Oh yes, Cilantro. That's what I meant.
Cilantro.
Anyways, you can find this fight in chapter 6 on pages 57 through 61, I believe.
Somewhere in that range, you'll find it.
Yeah. So basically, for the lead up for this fight, more or less after crash landing on the island of
Mortis and Sala.
Mortis and Sala, yes,
Thanks for making
one
me
of our
say
many
that.
death islands.
Yes.
Our crew ends
Yes.
up
Seemed clever at the time.
leading a revolution against Zeus, a exiled fae who has more or less become a I suppose you could call him the king, emperor, ruler, whatever of Morton Sala.
Yep, slave driver. But yeah, so he's technically like it's weird because Zaus's whole thing, and this is definitely a little bit of a sidetrack. He's the lord, but they're also supposed to be courtless fae, who means they don't have a proper court structure, but they also have like a hierarchy. To be honest with you, that might be something I'd maybe re-toy with a little bit down the road because I don't think that worked out the way I was hoping it to. But yeah, so no, Zaus is there. Zaus has himself a very lovely little tree fae wife by the name of Celestis, or as I pronounced it, Cilantro for the longest time.
Cilantro, yes.
Cilantro.
Yes,
Good old
yes.
cilantro. Look, she looks like cilantro.
But-
It'll work. But the fun twist with Celestis is, her she also has another name by Yen, which we know is Geo's wife. So the
Shock,
wife
shock,
he's
surprise, surprise.
Gas,
me-
gas.
during the events of the chapter, Yen and Geo end up working their ways back into their arms. And then I think there's a very cut to black at one point before they find their way back in the forest. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Bada
Wow, wow.
Bow, chicka, bow, wow.
Anyways, one thing leads to another, and our two lovebirds happen to stumble across a pair, two members of the task force who we've mentioned a few times before, specifically Corinth, Kilford, and Raziel Temperance.
Who are both quite injured coming after a failed attempt to capture Kaya and Leto. Which that
Yes.
fight did not make our top 15, spoiler alert. Good fight in its own, it just was too short-lived to make the cut. But the quick...
Didn't have that.
Yeah, the cliff notes of that is they try to capture Kaya. Kaya ends up overpowering Raziel with the wind as they kind of have like a wind off, and she ends up being more powerful. Which is kind of was actually, now that we can talk about this a little bit, chapter 9, that was actually one of the clues that was dropped that she was more than just a mere artificial celestial. Because when she faced off with another artificial celestial in a 1-to-1, she overpowers them to kind of suggest that she is more powerful. Because, she's Aouria and the source of Raziel's original magic. And then she also essentially burns off one of Cornwith's eyes in that fight. And Leto even gets a nice little redemption moment in there.
Yeah. Then was that fight stuck in a tree, but
I think he threw a grenade into
Anyways.
Cornwith's face.
that is true. That is true. Anyways, after Kaya and Leto make their escape, the two wounded task force members, as we mentioned, happen to stumble across Geo and Yen as they themselves are escaping from the capital.
And while this fight is technically qualified as Geo and Yen versus Raziel and Cornwith, this is just two completely individual fights. This is Geo versus Cornwith and Yen versus Raziel, because it quickly breaks down to two. While they fight side by side and they're kind of aware of what's going on, they're each having their own individual battles.
Not a lot of interplay, you would say.
No interplay. But while they don't have the interplay from the previous fight, their individual battles are quite awesome. And I think the thing that really kind of helps this fight stand out a little bit is it's just an all-out slugfest. Every single character in this fight brings their A game.
I mean, after the whole fight, alongside the fight with Shiloh and the others, I feel like this was one of the best cases of the artificial celestials, like, showing off the full extent of their powers and not having to hold back or not having to, deal with any other issues as they, like I said, basically just go all out against Yen and Geo.
I was just gonna say it's also one of my favorite kind of matchups, at least partially because Geo doesn't really have any powers other than his martial arts, and I always like it when a normal guy comes up against somebody super powered, and just has to bring it.
Yeah, and Geo's swordless. This is probably the first time we really get to see that on display. Like he uses a whole bunch of different techniques on display. He's doing things from like swatting acid crystals out of the air to dodging like the ground falling out from underneath him. And then there's also kind of something really fun in the course. The fight is Hornwith ends up mimicking Geo at the very end because if anyone who knows swordless techniques knows that you announce all your names. And there's a point where towards the end where Geo goes ultimate form Gladio, and Cornwith responds with final act Crimson Coliseum.
Oh,
and
that is so cool! The most anime thing ever, and I love it.
Cornwith had never named an attack at any point prior to this moment, and it completely is him being rubbed off from Geo.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a little bit of that Yen and Raziel fight too. Both Raziel and Cornwith actually kind of grow in their power sets from this fight. This is their Raziel actually creates new techniques on the fly to keep up with how powerful Yen's magic is. Recreates the technique that Kaya used to beat him and makes it his own. And he also creates essentially like after his sword gets broken by Geo, he creates like an air blade from the hilt. And it's just this idea that this is really is kind of pushing them to not just like their limits, but beyond their limits, and they're actually stronger after this fight because that's just how good their opponents were.
It's a good way of showing, like, this how like these are trained professionals, how not their, definitely not their first fight, and how, just a way of showcasing their experience, in my opinion.
Like one of my favorite pieces in this is there's a part towards the end of the Yen and the Raziel fight where after like she's like thrown like something, if memory serves, she has like a whole bunch of like vines coming out of the ground that's surrounding him, and they're all like taking like pot shots at him, and he ends up like cutting them all down with his sword, and he stands over her, and like she's kind of like she's a powerful fae, like she's a daughter of a fae queen, and she's like, you've never met a being like me, and Raziel just responds with like, to the contrary, I was trained, modified, and perfected with the sole purpose of killing beings just like you. And it plays into this idea, which is this is what the Artificial Celestial Project was created for. It was created to counter out the most powerful Faes. It was meant to be a counter to the Solstice Knights and the Fae Queens and Fae Princess could take down Heians by themselves. So get a chance. This is probably really the only good window where we actually get to see the Artificial Celestial Project working as intended.
One of those things where I enjoyed the spectacle of it, but I didn't give it the attention it deserved at the time.
Yeah, this guy definitely was one of those ones that kind of snuck under a lot of radars because there was a lot of other stuff going on. And it's if you haven't ever given a chance to kind of just read this fight back to back, like just load up those page numbers that we mentioned earlier on, and just like because I think it's only maybe 20 posts, maybe 24. It's not all that long, but it's just a lot of really like if you get to read those posts back to back and just like you read the Geo post, read the Yen post, you skip 15 posts, you read the Cornworth post, you read the Raziel post, you skip 10 posts, so on and so forth, and you get that proper back-to-back reading. It's really clear just like the high level techniques that are displayed that I think with like how the RP format works, this guy ended up becoming a bit of a sleeper fight.
Not to mention, I feel like from a story standpoint, this fight has a decent bit of catharsis as well, because even though both Geo and Yen were only introduced in this chapter, we did spend a good amount of time hearing about, their relationship, what they mean to each other. So seeing them fighting with each other, but fighting alongside each other, I don't know. I just felt like it had like a lot of nice, nice bit of a oomph that helped add a bit more weight to the fight, and really upped the stakes.
Plus, with the fact that this ends up becoming a loss for Geo and Yen, because
Yes.
spoiler alert, the Artificial Celestials beat out the non-Artificial Celestials. Yen gets captured and brought back into the prison of the Federation, which serves as Geo's goal of trying to find Cilantro all over again. So this fight really does set up nicely that there's still a wall for Geo to climb, and his goal now brings him directly in opposition with the Artificial Celestials, which ties him working with the crew just that much better.
Yes, it's just a nice catalyst all around.
I think there's also probably something a little unintendedly interesting that comes out of this fight that we didn't know at the time. But the fact that Cornrith's probably main Tempest Edge rivals is Geo and Leto. And now Leto, who's also picked up Swordless, that could be really interesting for down the road.
It's like poetry, it rhymes.
Oh yes, I will be interested to see their rematch. Should it ever come to pass.
Yeah, Leto and Cornrith have had two major fights now, and now we're setting up for a really interesting third final rematch if we ever get there.
I mean, to be fair, I wouldn't call the first encounter a fight, more like Corinth threatening Leto and Leto crying on the inside. But anyways, yes, continuing.
All right, so I think that's about everything we want to say about this guy. It was a really, really good fight. The only thing that keeps it from being further down on the list is a little bit shorter. Characters like Yen is a bit more of a secondary character, so while we definitely want to give credit to all these secondary characters for their awesome moments, she's only had one appearance in the story thus far, so it's hard to have that stronger emotional connection like we have with all the other characters in this fight. And this does really serve as kind of a bit of a debut, because we know there's always a vibe that this fight is setting up for greater things down the road. So it's those later payoffs will definitely overshadow this.
Not to mention, I would have liked personally to see a bit more, team play between the two before.
Yeah, some team play definitely would have been like husband and wife back to back fighting.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that definitely probably would have elevated this fight to higher levels.
Yeah, they have some really good chemistry, so I think they would have added to it. But overall, the fight was still pretty solid.
I think that wraps up fight number 8. Moving on to fight number 7.
The big matchup between Bedalia and Crow, and then you throw in a couple of extra characters, and you get Roche and Rear Admiral Calandra as well.
So that is how you pronounce it.
So anyway, like I said, this comes in at chapter 5, and I believe the page numbers are page 23 to 30. This is one of those that I was saying before. In retrospect, it's a little bit of a mess. Like a dive down into it, but I think it comes out okay.
It's definitely, this is a fight where its lows are low, but its highs are freaking high. Like, there's some aspects of this fight which are just really, really good. Also, I just enjoy being talking about this fight because I'm not in this one, so I don't feel like I have a bias talking about it.
So there you go. I unfortunately might.
Ooh,
But yeah, so to start with, I read this one yesterday, just to refresh myself, and I had forgotten exactly how all the pieces came together.
It is a
Like,
little messy how the pieces come together. You're not wrong, because I reread this the other day too.
some of the characters start off in completely different locations, some of them closer than others, if you
But
go by a map that didn't exist.
it's also a very quick fight. Like, it's only 2 pages on Right, no, sorry, not 2 pages. It's only about like it's technically 7 pages, but most of those pages don't actually have any posts on them. So it's quite quick. Like, I think there's only really a total of like 2 Calandra posts in the fight.
Yeah, and my couple of characters that show up at the end are just kind of there for support ultimately.
But at the end of the day, this fight is Bedalia versus Crow, which is where the meat and potatoes of it is.
I will say, full cards on the table, that Crow is probably my favorite of the artificial celestials.
I can definitely get behind that.
What?
Yeah, he's got at least in the setup for chapter 5, he had a neat little story where he's just sort of this Frankenstein's monster. He's just barely carried around on a leash. He's seconds away from snapping and killing anything and everything in his way.
Crow definitely probably does have the strongest artificial celestial introduction. Just being from, like, it's not even clear he's one of those from the get-go. We're still quite new to them at this point. Like, I think he's only the third one to make an appearance in the overall story at this stage, so they're still quite, like, mysterious and shrouded. And yeah, it's not clear, is he just like a mindless monster? Is he a bestial? Is he something else? So the fact there's, and then it turns out that he's Bedalia's former lover of everything. It adds a ton of to the reveal.
Not to mention, it adds like this absolutely massive, bittersweet kind of twinge to the actual fight itself as a whole.
Yeah, that's right. And it's just one of the things I appreciate about him is just that, he's got all this mystery, but one thing you do know for certain is that he's hostile to pretty much everything, and I believe that is very much characterized in this fight.
The opening of this fight is literally Crow pins Leo against a wall, and he's kind of like digging his claws into Leo's scalp, and Bedalia has to sing to draw his attention away, which kind of is where the fight starts, and it starts truly, and Leo escapes as a result. And it just plays into this idea that he's gonna kill everybody. There's a fun fact too: is this is technically Bedalia and Crow's second match of the chapter. They had a very quick earlier match earlier on, so that also immediately raises the stakes because Bedalia has already lost to him once.
Yeah, and that was when he was still on the leash, and at this point, the leash holder, Larkin, has been critically injured by Sonya and is no longer in control.
But going into the fight itself for some more meat and potatoes, it starts with just this kind of back and forth, which I got this nice little blurb here from a Bedalia post, which is like, blow after blow was exchanged from the angry Crow as time and again his songbird refused to even give him the satisfaction of true bloodshed. The lovebirds twirled around each other in a trance as if they were dancing, like they did once in their youth. Whether it was the dancing of the Lotus River Isle across the mainland of Amon, or a dance of blades where they sparred within the Nocturne Light's halls. Instead of passion in their eyes, though, there was a fear as the half owl's eyes of hatred and the creature's eyes. This was not sparring to hone the skills, it was a battle to the death. And I feel like this little paragraph here just really paraphrases what this is. It's a dance, it's a fight, but it's not like, this is not their youth all over again. This is something very different, very dark, very serious, and it really paints just how far the relationship has fallen.
So it starts out with all this knockdown, drag out. There's so much drama happening. Crow is tossing anything and everything around that's not Bedalia.
Eventually, sets his eyes on a little sniper who's in a tower, just kind of watching the whole thing go out by the name of Harry, which drags other people into the fight.
Now, to be fair, Harry is busy with something else. Because this sort of plays into how Chapter 5 is just a little bit of a mess because the whole fight ends up breaking out into the central courtyard, and there are at least 2 or 3 other different conflicts going on. Harry's dealing with Zack and Kaleo down on a different part of the map, and then on the other side is Roche and AC are having Isaiah. They're all having their own little fight, and it's all in the same location. So of course, all of these different elements start mixing together.
Until they don't, when Crow literally climbs up the tower, reaches a giant claw through. Oh, which at this point, dude, Crow is like growing 3 times the size. Pulls a claw through the window and plucks Harry out of the tower like a King Kong. I'm sorry, I just literally picture like Crow hanging up at like the Empire State Building with Harry in his like hand, and Roche is piloting a biplane around him. That's like literally how I picture the scene.
Which probably would have been a little bit more realistic than what actually happens, which is I forget who it is that did it, but at this point Roche has been locked into some stockades.
It was the result of the Isaiah fight.
Yeah, and so she's sort of trapped and sees, and for context, she and Harry are very, very close. So she sees this happen and starts struggling, and
That took a very while.
I forget who it is that frees her too, but somebody manages to
I think she
free
frees
her from the
herself.
locks. Does she?
I think she frees herself out of sheer like power of love. Breaks the stockade and gets out.
I don't know if that's. Well, anyway, it doesn't really matter because
Somebody fact check that. Put it in the comments below.
Yeah, it's a minor thing in the grand scheme of what's going on, which is eventually she breaks free and runs all the way up the tower and manages to catch Harry. Pulls him back to safety, and then dives out of the window and delivers this massive blow to Crow down below via a just sort of free fall gravity spinning kick.
Just like the kind of like the Suzaku meme kick of just like spinning in circles like a helicopter.
Oh god, that takes me back.
And I said that in the moment too. That's what it looked like.
Helicopter kick. But it drags Roche into the fight, which gives Bedalia very much needed aid. Because at this point, like, it's already clear from other fights at this point, you can't really beat an artificial celestial in a 1-to-1, which Geo and Yen learned in the previous fight before.
That's right.
Bedalia is struggling, but now with Roche by her side, she's got a bit more of an edge. But she's not the only person who comes to her aid.
So in amongst all of these other conflicts, Zack and Roche and Isaiah and everybody else, there's another confrontation happening on the bridge, which is nearby, which is Rear Admiral Praya is finally confronting the commanding officer of the fortress.
Octavius.
Yes.
Please don't talk about him. I hate him.
Well, it's a scene that I think started strong and kind of got overtaken by the fight that's taking place.
I mean, Glander's a total badass in it.
Yeah, and it's again one of my favorite scenes in a chapter that is otherwise kind of messy. But whatever happens, Calandra gets drawn into this fight with the artificial celestial, and so now there's even more backup for Bedalia, and it comes from
I actually love
that she would never have expected.
Yeah, I love that little Calandra sequence because it actually ends with her like giving orders after she deals with Stavros to like the various people being like, "You do this, you do that," and like it just ends with her going like, "I'll take Crow," and it's just this like pure level of confidence that comes off the Rear Admiral, which is just great for a Rear Admiral to have because she is one of the top dogs of the Federation. It's lovely to get to see her actually proud her stuff.
I felt like it did like a really good job with showcasing, just what the top dogs of the Federation are actually capable of. Just in general, just showcasing how much of like a veteran she is compared to the others and such.
Yeah, and just like she just jumps into the situation, and then you end up with like this excellent shot of Bedalia, Roche, and Calandra. Harry's injured at this point, so he's not really in the fight.
He's there in spirit.
I think
he does provide a little bit of help, but
he's lying on the ground under a blanket. He was tucked in.
Also, just going back a tiny bit, can I just say how I appreciate how different Crow is compared to some of like the other fights on this list? How he's basically just a big gigantic kaiju, and just sorry, I'm trying to think of a way to put this in my thousands of words.
Like he kind of like stands out in the crowd.
Yeah, it was a lot more like outright like monstrous compared to like our more like human fights.
I think my favorite thing actually going into that too is there's a moment in this fight where Crow gets this ability to like spew mist, and he like
Mhm.
coats the courtyard in mist, this like dark purple mist to the point no one can see him. But he's a kaiju at the same time, so it's literally a kaiju hid himself from the people he's fighting, which is just like the most terrifying thing of all.
It's horrifying, yeah.
But no, yeah, Crow's great. He stands out in so many different ways from the various people we fought. Like there's this idea of feralness in the role play that doesn't get as much attention as when I originally wrote the concept out. So getting to see Zev really play into that with Crow and giving a chance to explore that, you just for me from a world creating standpoint, I just appreciate someone doing something with it and then doing so well with it.
Yes, I mean, and not to mention, I'm trying to remember if this was before or after this fight, but we did have at least one flashback of Medallia and Crow, like in the past, and we got to see like how Crow used to be and how he was, an actually calm, decent person who, you know,
Almost a gentle giant back then.
yeah, like the exact opposite of how he is right now, which helps add to the whole like horrifying aspect of the whole artificial celestial project, just the
Feral nature.
current state he's in. Yeah,
I think one of my favorite little details that plays into the monstrousness and the way that Crow can stealth around is Zavas does this thing with the dialogue because he doesn't speak much, but when he does, she adds in the actual post she adds this little tiny text that's just like implied to be the words echoing. So it's just like this tiny little sinister echo off of whatever the last word in the sentence was.
Yeah, it's something we don't really talk too much about in these videos on this podcast, but like it is a factor into it, which is the presentation sometimes of like how people take a chance to really showcase to accentuate a fight with either art or how they present the fight in the nature, attaching music to it at the right time that really works while you're reading it. There's a lot of that at play in this one, how Zev writes for Crow and Badali in this fight, because it's almost artistic how she writes for it, and it really helps the moments hit that much harder. But yeah, so it's really great. And then I think going into the finale, this might have one of my favorite team plays of like all times for an ending. Because like once Calandra, Roche, and Badalia work together, which is like a combination I don't think anybody saw at any point. Like it never came up in the chapter planning, that's for sure.
Victim of circumstance.
Yeah, but it works so well. And there's also kind of like the girls get a team up and take down the big scary monster. There's a little bit of a saving the boy, which is Harry. There's a little bit of a deconstruction there, the stereotype, and it's great because it literally I think it involves Roche kicking up a luggage bag with explosives. Like she kicks it like a soccer ball.
Actually, yeah, I think that is the one small tiny way that Harry does help because she kicks that so that he can shoot it and set it off.
Yeah, and like it explodes in front of him, and then like Bedalia jumps on his back and like starts like putting wires into him, distracting him. For Calandra to like show off with her teleporting skills, and like teleports a literal pillar through him, not at him, through him. Like she makes the pillar appear through Crow's body. It's that's which is also goddamn terrifying as a concept. Like Calandra, like we got this giant, terrifying kaiju that can hide himself, and Calandra's just one-shotting him. Just shows how powerful the Admiralty is.
It's one of those very anime things that comes across somewhat rarely, but you want to see more of it.
Oh, it's so good! It's so good. It works so well as a debut of what Calandra can do without derailing the scene at all. And then it ends with my favorite part, with Crow running away and killing the worst character in that story, Octavius Stavros, and freeing me from having to roleplay as him. He was horrible.
And at least until recently, Crow was at large, which is terrifying in itself.
Yeah, we get to see his comeback is coming up right around the corner right now in Chapter 10. It's gonna be exciting to see it come back.
I'm very curious to see how that plays out, but also how they managed to contain him in the first place.
Yes. I'm not going to go into that now, but there is an answer to that. But going back to the whole point, which I think the last thing we have to talk about is the Bedalia Ramir relationship. When we talk about grading these fights, we always talk about the emotional component, and like this is such an emotional fight for Bedalia. This is like one of the most key things she's done in the entire story up until this point. This is lovers turned enemies. There's just it ties Bedalia more directly into the Black Blood storyline. This is not something that's just happening to her crew. This is something that's happening to her. It just works on so many levels because you want Bedalia to win, but you also kind of don't, because like for Bedalia to win this fight, I mean, she has to hurt the person she loves the most. Like it's such a tragic set of circumstances.
And she's even like trying to talk to him, trying to like convince him to stop what he's doing, to see reason, and it just
She sings
really
to him.
twist. What's that?
She sings to him. Yeah, she like Crow's nickname for her is Songbird because
Oh,
she's
yeah.
a singer, and we get to bring the musician component of her character back up. It's just so good.
It just very twist. Yeah, it very much twists the knife.
It's a great payoff to what ultimately came, what I personally think some of the best build up we've had. Because, like I said, I've said it before. I'll probably say it again. Chapter 5 was a bit of a mess all around, but the story arc that Bedalia goes through all the way through, like, she's a solid. I think, is this the first time we see her in her assassin garb?
It is.
Yeah.
So it sets up all that real nicely, and she goes through the whole operation, maybe the cleanest of everybody on the crew, until we get to Crow.
Yeah, like she like takes out 2 light company operatives, avocados.
Olives.
She takes out 2 of them, and then she climbs all the way up to Mordheim. Like she like scales a mountain, infiltrates solely by herself, just completely in her element. And then she meets Crow, and she starts tripping up, and it really just like helps display how much emotion and how much vulnerable Bedalia is in the situation. The only thing that really keeps this fight for me from being higher or lower down the list is, as Rue pointed out, it is a little messy. When we talk about posts flowing into each other as well, this was one that was a little more clunky.
And it's not necessarily a reflection on the fight itself so much as it is a reflection of the entire chapter up to that point, because as we all know, a lot of it got really messy towards that middle portion.
Yeah, the role playing format just it happens, right? There's a level of throw stuff at the wall and just hope it works out. I think there's, but it said for what the highs are in this fight, which for me is always the smoke cloud hiding a kaiju or Calandra teleporting pillar through him.
Kicks.
Yeah, it's just so good, and it also plays nicely into this theme where you kind of get this vibe that Light Company and the Tempest Edge could be friends one day. And the fact that they work together here is kind of a nice earlier indicator. Like that's actually like there's some grounding for that. There's some realism because they work together in this fight. Maybe they can work together down the road.
Maybe circumstances will allow for it, but
Maybe.
we won't know.
Also, can I? This really isn't a part of the fight itself, but can I just say that I really like Zeb's post in the aftermath on page 30, where she basically just calls out Calandra for what for what the Federation has done, and just completely just loses it on her. And I thought it was just a nice way of showcasing like how much Crow's condition has affected her, and just massive contrast to how she usually is.
It's a very powerful speech. Like I'm looking at it right now.
It's really good, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it really showcases just Bedalia's vulnerability in that moment too. Like that idea that like when emotions are running hot, like we say things we would never say normally, and this is Bedalia's emotions running off. Like at what's like the highest temperature possible known to man.
Yeah, you can just tell like how much like she's blaming herself just as much as she's blaming the Federation. How utterly like torn up she is, and it's a very nice character moment for her.
For sure. It plays out nicely because this fight is a little bit of an anticlimax, but Zev manages to find a nice resolution regardless, and it works. This is just a really good fight, and I think it's also going to work really well as a setup for things to come in the future.
And then also an interesting character point for Calandra as well, because she counters it with empathy, but she's also like, there's really no time for this right now, be realistic.
Yeah, there's still a war going on in the background. I think Leo, your captain is off getting hurt somewhere else.